Welcome to the Ringer NFL show. Sheil, Kapadia here with Steven Ruiz. Feels like we were, just here like 12 hours ago. Sunday night to Tuesday night is just a blur for me, Ruiz. I don't know about you, but it's just like locked in a room. Don't go outside. No exercise. Just get to like this certain part of the week where you feel like, all right, I'm as caught up as I'm going to be, and now I can look ahead to week 2. That's kind of where I'm at, where I'll be at the end of the show.
It's been a blur since the Sunday night show. And I went outside today for the first time all day, and my skin started to burn. It was like, I felt the need to go watch Bo Nix on tape.
I know. Especially week 1. By the time when you get to week 12, you're like, all right, there's some teams here I can start ignoring. But week 1, it's so exciting. You've been waiting so long to see all these guys play, all these teams play, new coaches, new coordinators, new quarterbacks. And so we looked at it. You've got your quarterback rankings will be out by the time people listen to this, I believe, on Wednesday. And so we thought for this midweek show, let's talk quarterbacks. I just said, give me 6 guys who you want to talk about on the show. Come to the show with some takes, analysis, whatever you want to talk about them. I've watched 5 out of the 6. So when we get to 6, you carry us, but the other 5 I've got opinions on as well. So that's the show today. And I'm excited because I was surprised at least one of the selections you had here. So I'm curious to hear what you have to say about them. But let's start with the guy who played Monday night, since we recorded the Sunday night show. We did not record after Monday Night Football. Aaron Rodgers stayed healthy for the game, had some moments, had a nice drive in the first half. Ultimately, the game was not competitive. The 49ers went up and down the field, but he was the first guy you wanted to discuss. What's your take? What did you see from Aaron Rodgers in his first full game as a New York Jet?
Yeah, on the first viewing, on the live viewing of it, I was really, if I was a Jets fan, I would have been deflated by that performance. Even more so than maybe last year when obviously Aaron Rodgers goes down. But Aaron Rodgers did not look good. The team did not look good. The defense, the pass rush, none of it looked good. But on second viewing, on the All-22, I don't think Rodgers was that bad. I think there are some reasons to be concerned, especially the mobility. I think that was the first thing to go in Green Bay his final year there. And I assume that it had to do with the calf injury because he was on the injury report with the calf injury in his final year in Green Bay, but no such injury report issues this time around. And he's still having a hard time getting outside of the pocket and then resetting and then throwing downfield when he gets outside of the pocket. And I think that's where the biggest issues were. Like you saw it on the Floyd sack. I think you even saw it on the pick to Garrett Wilson, where he has pressure in his face. He kind of has to throw across his body. He can't step into the throw and he leaves it inside and it's tipped and it's picked. So that's where I'd be most concerned. It's the movement and how that affects his arm strength. But in terms of like distributing the ball, getting the ball out on time, getting the ball out on target, I thought he looked like the old Aaron Rodgers at times.
I felt the same way. I thought like, all right, the Jets did not play well last night. I thought it was going to be a more competitive game. They get blown out. But if you're just isolating Rodgers and what he looked like, and you're a Jets fan and you had this idea in your head of what is this going to look like, 40 years old coming off an Achilles injury, I actually thought it was kind of encouraging. I mean, he's still doing Aaron Rodgers things. He had to throw to Lazard down the left sideline where it's like he just ran it over and handed it to him. He draws him offside and hits Lazard for the touchdown down the middle of the field. He had some nice throws on that one drive where they're hitting Garrett Wilson, I think 3 times on third down. And so, yeah, I actually ended the night and even this morning thinking I want to see more. Like I'm not out on the Jets by any means. I mean, they couldn't run the ball at all. I think a big thing in that game for me at least was like, I forgot Nathaniel Hackett is still the designer and the schemer and the play caller. And I know Aaron Rodgers is going to get to the line of scrimmage and do what he wants to do and change stuff. But still, like during the week and stuff in those meetings, somebody has to be putting stuff together. And even if Rodgers is driving a lot of that person is still Nathaniel Hackett. And when you watch that game and you have Shanahan on one side and Hackett on the other side, and you look at the Jets game plan, which was they came in wanting to run the ball, which is fine, but they couldn't run the ball at all. I mean, no. They had first 3 quarters, on early downs, they run it 13 times for 31 yards. 2.4 yards per carry. So it was like the classic run, Aaron Rodgers save us on third down. And it's like, that's not how you want to play. They didn't adjust. They couldn't do anything. So that was a reminder to me that, like, if this does work out, if it gets fixed, like, Rodgers is going to have to just kind of take control of everything, even the game planning during the week, because just Hackett's not going to give them any type of advantage. If anything, he's giving them a disadvantage.
Yeah, and then like maybe you can cope and be like, oh, well, in Green Bay it worked. Hackett was the OC there. He won MVP twice in a row, but Matt LaFleur was calling those plays.
Right.
And I agree with you. Like, you need to give him some schemed up easy buttons on early downs, on first and second down. And he got none of it. It kind of reminds me of the conversation we had about Joe Burrow on Sunday night, where I think Rodgers doesn't like to be under center. He doesn't like to turn his back to the defense. He has said that. He's been on record saying that he likes to be in the shotgun. And when you don't have Matt LaFleur there kind of dictating the terms of the offense and creating the structure of the offense, you have who I don't know, maybe it's not fair to call him a yes man, but I feel like he's a yes man in Nathaniel Hackett. I think that's one of the big reasons he's there with Rodgers.
Oh, I
right
think
now.
that's fair. Yeah, I think you're
Yeah.
being kind. I mean, you could call him other stuff. I mean, he seems like a nice guy. I've always said, if he were like our neighbor or something, your friend's dad or whatever, I think I would get along with the guy. But just in this role, he might not be cut out for.
No, I don't think he is. And I don't think we saw anything on Monday night to suggest that he's improved over his time as a play caller from Denver. And then last year, obviously battling with some bad quarterback play. But yeah, there's no melding of the run game and the pass game to me. I didn't see any really under center play action plays where Rodgers had like a deep crosser that was wide open. He could just make an easy throw without, reading it out. It was more like, we're going to spread it out and I'm going to get rid of the ball quickly. And I think one of the things that was missing was like the repeated precision where you can bank on it, where like the Tom Brady thing, the Drew Brees thing. I think Rodgers used to have that. And there were a couple misses. The 4th and 1 throw to Wilson, I thought was a bad miss. The pocket was clean. He kind of faded back on the throw and left it really far inside and on the ground. And it wasn't like he was protecting him from a hit. There was no defender in the middle of the field there to hit Wilson. So I thought that was just a bad miss. And if he's not hitting those, then, and he can't get outside the pocket, those are kind of like the pillars of his game when he was an elite quarterback. That mobility and that repeated precision kind of blended those two styles. Because I always felt like he bridged the gap between like the processors, the Tom Brady's, the Drew Brees, the Peyton Mannings, and then the new age, like Patrick Mahomes. He kind of played the middle of that. And I kind of feel like he lost both of those things, both of those elements to his game.
Yeah, the creativity blended with the just make the right throw over and over again. Yeah, that is kind of what it looked like. I'm still first game back, didn't play last year. 40 years old. I'm still, I hear what you're saying. I want to see more. There's some of the stats actually, the counting stats obviously were not that impressive, but I was just looking at like drop back success rate. He was top 10 for all starters in week 1. He was only 13 for 21 for 167 yards and 1 sack. I thought the O-line in pass protection was like pretty good. I'm not saying it's going to be elite, but if you get that level O-line play, I think that's going to be a good thing for the season. We'll see Mike Williams, how much he comes back, what kind of role he can have on this offense. It was a lot of Allen Lazard, made some plays, but a lot of Allen
Too much.
Lazard.
We could say it. Too much Allen Lazard.
Too much. So I'm curious about the run game. I mean, I really thought the run game was going to give them more. So I don't know if the Niners were playing that well or if that's a Jets thing. That's another one. Let's get a bigger sample for. But yeah, I didn't look at it and think, all right, like Rodgers is the reason they lost this game or anything like that. They couldn't run it and the defense couldn't get off the field. I mean, the Niners scored on 8 straight possessions there. So they didn't have much of a chance.
Even like on the other side of the ball, we said the defense didn't play too well, but you're not going to go up against Kyle Shanahan every week. And I think he was able to take the teeth out of the pass rush. I think I think Purdy was only pressured on 2 dropbacks out of 28. Like that's not viable, but I don't think that's going to continue. There is depth concerns there. But Rodgers, I think he ended up like 3rd in PFF grade. Like it was like 86 passing grade. So apparently it was that we're not the only ones that don't think it was that bad. He only dropped 2 spots in the rankings this week. He dropped down from 9, where I didn't really know what to do with him in the preseason. I was just like, I haven't seen the guy play in a year. I'm just going to base it on what I last saw. And when we last saw him in Green Bay, I think he was like a fringe top 10 quarterback. He only drops 2 spots. I think he's still in that same area. I don't think he's cooked. That's the one thing I'll say. I don't think he's cooked.
You don't think he's what? Good?
Cooked.
Oh, cooked.
Like, I don't think he's done.
I was like, geez, man. I agree with that. I think physically, I mean, that arm is just still like, in our lifetime, just watching him to just that throw down the left sideline. I'm like,
Oh, it's
oh man,
beautiful.
he's still got that in his bag. So yeah, I want to see more. Let's see more of Aaron Rodgers. Certainly not giving up on him, or I'm not even discouraged after that one start. All right, the second guy. This is the guy, Ruiz, who I was surprised that you want to not because I know you like him. I like him too. Maybe not as much as you, but I don't know that anyone likes him as much as you do.
That's
But
right.
I was surprised that after week one, he kind of made this list, and that is Justin Herbert. So, what stood out to you about Justin Herbert and the Chargers? They get the win over the Raiders in week one.
I think people saw the J.K. Dobbins, the long runs. The one run was like under center with a fullback on the field, and they were like, "Oh, we got a smash mouth run game back in L.A. Like this is going to make Justin Herbert's job so much easier." Like you watch the tape or you watch this game, and I don't think it was any easier for him. I think he was in the same hell that he's been in for the last couple of years. His average time to pressure was 2.4 seconds. Like he was getting instant pressures. I thought the two tackles did well. Slater did well, and Joe Alt did well, especially against Max Crosby. But they were having a lot of trouble picking up games, picking up stunts, and I
Yeah.
thought there were a lot of free rushers there. And still, he only took one sack the whole game, despite facing those free rushers. And it was on third down, where sacks don't matter as much. On first and second down, they kill drives. On third down, your drive's going to get killed anyway. No interceptions, no fumbles. He only missed two throws, according to Sports Info Solutions, two uncatchable balls. And both of those passes were in the red zone. I don't know if you saw these passes, but one was to Hayden Hurst in the back of the end zone, where I think if he throws it on target, it gets picked. It's more like everyone was covered and I'm kind of throwing it away, but still giving my guy a chance. And it was the very next play. He has Lad McConkey on like a corner route in the red zone. And Max Crosby, they don't block Max Crosby. That's the one guy I feel like you have to block on this defensive
Yeah.
line. They're like, nah, let's just let him in. So Herbert has to rush the throw, and he has to throw it way before McConkey makes the break in his route. And he throws it to the back end zone. He keeps it in a safe spot. He keeps it in a spot where the corner who's kind of sinking off of his route on the outside can't undercut it. And McConkey like kind of takes a different angle. He takes a flatter angle than Herbert thought he was going to take. And that's counted as a miss too. And I think the two misses, quote unquote misses, were actually very smart plays that kept the ball out of the hands of the Raiders. So to me, it's just another example of him playing like a near perfect game in terms of decision making and accuracy and all that and pressure management, and not rewarded by it. Because like the numbers, and this is probably why you're surprised I wanted to bring up, the numbers are just not impressive at all. It's like 5.5 yards per dropback. I don't even know what the EPA numbers are, but they're not that impressive. But I think it's just another year of us Herbert apologists being like, well, actually, if you watch the film, he's a lot better. And I think it's just going to fall on deaf ears again. But I'm not enthused by what I saw out of the first week of the Greg Roman offense.
Yeah, I like Herbert. I've been a Herbert defender, and a lot of it goes back to the early Herbert where it was just showcasing like that what you just said makes me sad about Justin Herbert, because think about what you were saying. Well, he didn't take sacks. He didn't throw interceptions. He made the right plays. Like, all right, that's part of it. But I want the guy who's like week 18 against the Raiders. We need a drive. It's 4th and 11. I got to make this throw, and I make it, and everyone's jaw drops going, oh my gosh, that was an amazing throw. Like
Josh
that
Palmer dropped
guy,
that
they
throw,
had,
though. He
what's
did that
that?
throw in the red zone. He did that throw in the end zone, and Josh Palmer drops it. It's like
Yes,
the
he
same
did have
exact
one of
throw
those.
into a tight window.
Yeah, and Romo was making the point that that was perfectly placed because he's trying to protect his receiver from taking a big hit. That was a nice throw, but that was like one. The rest of this game, it's what you said. It's like, all right, he's making the right decision. All right, they're short of the sticks again on third down. Oh, he's getting hit, but at least he's gets the ball away. And oh, it's a 4-yard gain there. I mean, it was tough to watch. And if you're like a Chargers fan, I'm not saying like you won the game. It's a new era. You knew this season was going to be the passing game was going to be tough. But yeah, 17 for 26 for 144 yards. He was 29th in success rate, which was ahead of only Bo Nix and Deshaun Watson. And I agree with you. I didn't watch it going, oh my God, he left plays on the field. Like that would have looked bad with most quarterbacks, but that's kind of like, what is this Chargers offense going to look like all season is really the conclusion I came down to. I mean, they had nothing going downfield. They had one downfield completion all game long. It was kind of like, get the ball out. Don't take sacks, live to see another down. Let's let the Raiders blow it. And the Raiders did blow it. It was like, let's let our run game win it. Let's let our defense win it. And that did happen. But man, first half of this game, they had 2 first downs on 7 possessions. They were 4 for 15 on third down. Like, it's hard, when you win by 12 and you had the season they had last year, you're probably happy about that if you're a Chargers fan. At the same time, if we're looking at this analytically and being like, is this going to be sustainable for a whole season against more competent teams? It's kind of hard for me to get there with what he's working with. I mean, you're talking about Quentin Johnson and Josh Palmer and Ladman. I'm not saying like any of these guys are horrible, but there just aren't a lot of answers in that offense right now with the scheme and the surrounding cast.
I'll say Quentin Johnson is horrible at this point. I think we could call it at this point. He had a
nice 16-yard catch and run. Yeah, he was very involved.
Yeah, maybe too involved too. Is the same as the Lazard thing. Well, Sports Info Solutions has like a similar metric to PFF grades, but they format it so it's like EPA. It's called points above average. Herbert had 14 positively graded plays, according to this metric. 5 of them ended in negative EPA anyway. That's like over half of his good plays end up in negative EPA. And that's just the margin for error that he's working with. There just isn't one for him.
Yeah, there definitely were a lot of plays where he is like getting hit and just gets rid of the football, and it's not a big gain, but to your point, it's also not a negative play. So we'll see what it looks like as the season goes on. I mean, McConkey had a real nice play there at the end with the touchdown, so that was nice to see, and he was a good prospect, and so maybe there's more to it. The run game, I mean, you're getting 40-yard runs, 60-yard runs in the run game, so there are avenues there towards winning. I do just wonder about this passing game, both like you mentioned with Greg Roman and just what he's got to work with there, what it's going to look like. I'm almost like, let's fast forward to 2025 with him and let's get some speed. Let's get some players at wide receiver and then see what it looks like. All right. Indianapolis Colts are playing. They got to be in the multi-view because they've got Anthony Richardson, and that's who we're talking about next year. This is the guy you and Deontay said, no, like you can have some hyperbole after this performance. And I looked at the box score and I said, 9 for 19 and 9 completions. I mean, how good could those 9 completions possibly be? I watched them. It was a lot of fun. First of all, give me your what your take is now after having watched the film of Anthony Richardson.
My take is just don't overreact to completion percentage. That's what I'm imploring football fans. Just enjoy this guy. The numbers are ridiculous. And like, they don't make any sense. He finished averaging 9.6 yards per dropback. That was the highest in the league, ahead of Patrick Mahomes, against higher than Josh Allen, higher than Brock Purdy, higher than anybody. Finished 6th in EPA per dropback. His success rate was 37%. That's a bottom 10 number. Those are contradictory results. And I can't believe he's able to do this. And then my favorite stat from this game is he was pressured 6 times in this game. He averaged 10 yards per play on those snaps alone. Like, he is so good at managing pressure, throwing the ball downfield, and completing passes at a high rate when he throws it downfield. There are accuracy concerns, but the funny thing about him is when he misses wildly, but all the other throws are just like right on the money. It's like he's either the most accurate quarterback you've ever seen or the least accurate quarterback you've ever seen. I'm going to cite another SIS stat. They have 2 accuracy measures. They have catchable pass rate, and then they have on target rate. Catchable pass rate is what it sounds like. If the ball is catchable, you get a check mark. On target rate is more like ball placement. Like, did you put in the right place? Did the receiver have to adjust? So the on target rate is always lower or always higher than the completion rate. Obviously, he is like one of the few quarterbacks where it's exactly the same. So it's either, like I said, he's either missing it completely or he's putting it right on the money. So he's just like such a fun quarterback to watch. And I know there are questions about it because I feel like down to down, there is inconsistency. He does miss throws. He missed 2 throws to A.D. Mitchell that would have been touchdowns. But he's just so much fun. And I feel like when that flip switches for him, he's just going to be a great player. It's all about health with him, and it's all about accuracy. If he can figure those things out, the rest of his game, I feel like, is fully fleshed out. And he still has a lot of room to grow.
It was as exciting as you guys told me it was on Sunday. I mean, in a league where at least this week, it was just like check down. I hate so much to take what the defense gives you. Oh, they're playing too high. He breaks the rules of the defense. I mean, the play they had, not the first Alec Pierce one, but I think it was the second one where they're playing like Tampa 2, they're too deep and they run the post over the deep
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
safety, and he launches it. Like the safety's like, no, that's not a throw. Like you don't go over that in practice. You don't go over that in meeting rooms that the quarterback's going to attempt that pass. And he's attempting those passes. I mean, he had over 20% of his pass attempts went downfield in week one. I mean, how can you not love watching that? It is a roller coaster. Now I agree with what you said, because I remember this. I had this take with Josh Allen early in his career where like he would get made fun of a lot. And I understand why, but like when he missed so badly that it almost made you cackle. Like, oh my gosh, like somebody in the front row might have a bloody nose after that. And Anthony Richardson has some of those for sure. You saw those even in those 10 incompletions, but I was watching him wondering, like, and I asked you and Deontay this, like you mentioned the accuracy. The accuracy bar for him is never gonna be as high as it needs to be for
Right.
other quarterbacks, because he wants to hit on the big plays, and he's going to take more of those attempts probably than any other quarterback. And then there are going to be defenses obviously who come in against the Colts and are like, make him, put together a 12 play drive. And he might not be able to do that with his arms right now, but he is a dynamic runner, like the design run game with him, the option run game. I mean, good luck with that. So that can kind of be their crutch, rather than, whereas we talked about Joe Burrow and they're trying to like complete 6-yard passes and have a 12 play drive. For the Colts, that's more going to be all right, run game, throw, run game, throw, that kind of thing. So the physical traits are just so rare. When we are always looking at these guys going, oh, no one can do this. Like for him, it's just no one can argue the other side that these physical traits aren't rare. Not only that, 60-yard touchdown to Alec. I mean,
Whew.
he's pressured. He's moving to his left. He's got pressure on him, and it's 60 yards, like you mentioned. Just when you question the accuracy, then it's a perfect pass, like a high degree of difficulty, perfect pass. So yeah, I don't think you guys exaggerated at all. That was a very fun experience about 2 hours ago when I went through this film.
I have a stat to back up what you're talking about, especially like about the zone coverage thing.
Yeah.
Checking it down, his A dot against zone coverage was 17.4. The league average is 6.9. He doubled it
That's
up. Or he
crazy.
more than doubled up. He almost tripled it. That's
Yeah.
insane to me. Like Baker Mayfield, who we're going to talk about later, his A dot against zone coverage was 2.8.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, like you talk to coaches and this isn't what they say about when they're playing, too high, or they're playing zone. The whole purpose of zone is keep everything in front of you. Even those Legion of Boom teams, it was like, that's it, make them work for it. And that's the point of playing zone coverage, and it just doesn't matter with him. He's going to take those shots downfield. So yeah, overall his average pass went 16 and a half yards downfield. That was on average 5 more yards than any other quarterback, which is just wild. And to your point, what I really couldn't believe rewatching it is I'm like, they left like 2 40-yard plays on the field where I don't know if it
Yeah.
was just a bad throw, whether it was a miscommunication on one of them. I think the guy got bumped a little bit. The timing was up, but like they really weren't far off from this being like, what would it be? 11 for 21 for 300 yards or something like that. It could have been the weirdest stat line.
Those are like 1960s AFL numbers. Like those are not real numbers in today, especially today's NFL. Well, like you said, like everything today is about keeping things in front of you if you're a defensive team. And he just does not comply. He's not going to comply.
Next quarterback on the list here. A little bit different, I would say, his Sunday than Anthony Richardson's was. And this is, I want to hear how deep into the panic meter you are getting, because the next guy is Kirk Cousins of the Atlanta Falcons. He goes 16 for 26, 155 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, 2 sacks in an 18-10 loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. What stuck out to you about Kirk Cousins' debut in Atlanta?
Honestly, the most concerning thing has nothing to do with what I saw in film. It was the play calling and the splits afterwards. He threw 1 pass from under center, and it was a spike. He threw 0 play action passes. This is Kirk Cousins we're talking about. This is the under center play action guy. And the fact that he isn't doing that tells me, or makes me believe one thing, and that's that he can't move, that he doesn't have the mobility to get under center and take drops and then run bootleg. They didn't run any boots. This is a Sean McVay offense. That's the whole point of the offense. That's why you bring Kirk Cousins in and give him all that money that they gave him. And the fact that they're not calling those plays is very concerning. I think that's the biggest red flag from this week, even bigger than anything you saw from Bryce Young, anything you saw from Aaron Rodgers, anything you saw from maybe Jalen Hurts. this was a huge red flag to me. And then the interceptions are really concerning to me. The second one was just a clear example of a guy that doesn't have the arm strength to make those tough throws in a tight pocket. Like, he had bodies in his face. He kind of double clutch. He had the guy wide open. It was a little wheel route down the sideline, and he just leaves the throw inside, and he gets picked off by a defender off the ball, basically. And then the first interception, that's the one that really frustrated me. It was to Drake London. So let's rewind a little bit. The drive before, they're in the red zone. They run this little concept where they have one receiver to the right. He runs like a little quick 5-yard stop route. They have a crosser from the other way going like over top of that. So it's kind of like a high-low read. And then behind that, they have a little post route into the end zone. The Falcons are playing man coverage. So that little stop route is covered. The safety, the one safety deep, jumps on the crossing route. So the post is wide open. What does Kirk Cousins do? He rushes through his progression, just throws the stop route into double coverage, basically, and dirts it into the ground. The next drive, and this is where the interception comes, it's basically the same concept. It's not the same exact concept, but it's the same thing. Little stop route, little crossing route, and then a little post in behind. This time he throws the post, but the defense isn't the right look for it. They're playing too high safety. They're playing quarter safety, and it's the easiest interception you're ever going to see. This is Kirk Cousins. He's supposed to be the processor. He's supposed to be the smart guy. He's supposed to be able to make these decisions in a hurry. If he's not doing that, and then he doesn't have the mobility anymore, and he had no mobility to spare, mind you, what do you do? And if you can't run the play action stuff, like, you're not going to ask him to be Joe Burrow. You're not going to ask him to be Anthony Richardson. You're not even going to ask him to be 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers. Like, I don't know what the viable option is here. What my hope is that as he continues to play, the rust will come off, and maybe he will be able to run those under center play actions. So I'm not totally like writing him off, but that is as bad of a showing as you could possibly have expected from him.
I thought it was one of the more alarming performances from week one because of what you said. Not anyone can have a bad game, but they were deciding to play a very certain style, to all the points you made about not moving him, no play action, nothing under center, no bootlegs. I mean, he made one play, it seemed to me, out of the pocket, which was the touchdown to Kyle Pitts, where it's kind of a second reaction play and they busted the coverage and it was a wide open guy in the end zone. So you didn't have any of that. Wanted to get, this was catch the ball and piss in shotgun and get rid of it. They didn't attempt a single pass over 20 yards or more. We just talked about Anthony Richardson. 20% of his passes went downfield. Kirk Cousins and Daniel Jones were the only two players in week one who did not attempt a single pass that went 20 yards or more. He didn't want to get hit. The ball was coming out quickly. He barely moved. By the way, he was pressured at a pretty high rate in this game. I mean, if that offensive line isn't going to be good, that's going to be a problem. The Steelers blitzed at the lowest rate of any defense in the NFL, and they still pressured him at the 6th highest rate. That's bad if you're an offensive line. Like, the ball's coming out quickly. That's a no excuse type thing where this should be very easy to protect him for 2.5 seconds, and they couldn't do that. So it looked like a QB who's not confident in himself physically, and, that's understandable on some level. You're 36 years old, coming off an Achilles, new team, new coordinator, all those different things. But with this version of Cousins, you're very limited. Like you said, maybe next week we'll be having a different story and it'll look different. And we'll say, okay, they were just easing him in. But they're going to Philadelphia on Monday night. And if that offensive line isn't playing well, we're not that far away from a Penix watch, Ruiz. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm not coming in with a hot take, but I don't know how far. If that's the version of Cousins you're getting, I don't know.
I'm with you. And I'm not like the biggest Penix fan, but I think you have a more viable offensive setup with him than you do with Cousins. At least he could push the ball downfield. He's going to throw the ball more than 20 yards downfield. We even saw that in the preseason. I'm still shocked they didn't play him more beyond that first game in the preseason.
They were saving him. They knew he had to play.
maybe, but the problem with him is he's not very good at throwing on the run either. Like, that was one of his big weaknesses at Washington. So if you can't even really run the boot action with him and expect efficiency at a high level. So I don't know. It could be rough for these Falcons. I was high on them. I picked them to win the division, but I don't know. They could be the 3rd best team in the division.
Yeah, it was not a it was again, it was one game, we'll see, but it certainly was not a promising start for Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, that's the number one thing I want to see when they play in week 2, just like what does it look like? What do they try to do? Are they trying to play this exact same way? Because that's going to be a problem. Or do they have different wrinkles and they say, okay, we can't play that way. Let's at least try to play differently. So that's going to be the Eagles gave up the most explosive plays of any defense in the NFL in week 1 to the Packers. They gave up 7 explosive plays, and now you have a guy who didn't throw the football downfield once in week 1. So, yeah, something's got to give in that Falcons-Eagles matchup on Monday Night Football. All right, next guy up, speaking of the Philadelphia Eagles, is Jalen Hurts. Played on Friday night in Sao Paulo, Brazil, went 20 for 34 for 278 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I didn't think the performance was nearly as good as those numbers indicate. I have a hunch you didn't think the performance was nearly as good as those numbers indicate. What stuck out to you about Jalen Hurts?
Oh, well, one thing, we didn't get to see him against cover zero. So we didn't get to answer that question that was lingering from last year. The Packers ran, according to True Media, they didn't run any cover zero. I thought they ran one play that I would have charted as cover zero. That was kind of, they had 2 guys drop out. So maybe that confused the charters. I don't know. But his reaction to it, I think it was the 20-yard AJ Brown where he catches the ball, breaks the tackle, and
Left
then
side,
runs
yeah.
for a first down. It's a positive result, but it's the results are the process is the same as we saw last year. Like their reaction to cover zero was to throw short of the sticks, and then their receiver would get tackled. They'd have to punt the ball on third down. So I don't know. We didn't see any progress there, but I'm just concerned about the same stuff that we talked about with Hurts last year, like the pocket presence, the decision making. I think there are throws there that he just doesn't see. There were a couple plays, especially on that 2-minute drive, which might be the worst 2-minute drive from a quarterback that was technically successful because they get a field goal at the end. Like the first drop back, he dirts a throw to a wide open, or not wide open, but an open AJ Brown over the middle on a little dig route. He has a bad turn down a couple plays later where I think Devontae Smith is open in the seam and he's kind of dropping his eyes and dealing with the pressure and ends up throwing the ball away. Later in the drive, he has Devontae Smith on a little option route where Smith can either break out, he can break in, or he can sit down if the defensive back is sitting off of him. Smith sits down. Hurts doesn't throw to him for whatever reason. He's looking right at him. Gets outside of the pocket and throws it away. And then in the red zone, they had a play set up that was similar to the Saquon touchdown pass, but it was Goddard kind of leaking out, kind of running a Y leak style of play. He initially stumbles out of the snap, but he is wide open in the corner of the end zone. If Hurts just sticks with it and just stays in the pocket, it's a wide open throw, an easy throw. But he runs into a sack and takes a 6-yard loss instead. And somehow they end up with a field goal anyway. I think that speaks to the margin for error that this guy is working with. And too often for me, and for a guy that's making that much money, he wastes that margin for error. That would be my big concern if I was an Eagles fan, is we didn't really see the progression in the areas we wanted to see progression from Hurts in this week 1 game.
Yeah, the blitz point, like if you're a Packers fan, I mean, hopefully someone's talking to Jeff Hafley about that. I mean, they blitzed Hurts only 19.5% of the time. It was like a bottom 10 rate in the NFL. And to your point, last year, the blitzes that killed the Eagles were the big blitzes. Rush 6 or more. They were a disaster. We watched it week after week. They didn't send one big blitz at Jalen Hurts in week 1. You have the entire offseason to game plan for this game, and you don't do that once. I thought they were going to do it every third down until the Eagles burned them.
It was insane.
It was wild. That was a mind-boggling game plan from the Packers.
I guess at BC, they didn't have the multi-view. They didn't have the YouTube TV package, so he was missing the games at BC.
Yeah, maybe you're right. The thing that I thought Hurts was terrible at, I thought his decision making in this game was atrocious. I think you and I, and we'll talk about him throughout the course of the season, there are probably going to be weeks where I say, no, I don't think he was as bad as here, or I didn't have the same issues you had with him here. In this game, the decision making, I mean, both interceptions were bad. One of them's in the red zone in the fourth quarter in a tight game. And I had Sean Syed on, who comes on the Philly special every week, and we did a big Hurts breakdown. And I thought his point was fantastic, which is that from the moment Hurts decides to do something till the point the ball actually gets to where it's supposed to go, that takes way too long. Like he doesn't have the arm to, like Josh Allen can be late and it's okay because the ball's going to get Anthony Richardson. Jalen Hurts doesn't have that specifically when he's on the move. Like you think of him as an athletic quarterback, but when he's scrambling, he doesn't have like those physical traits where he can just gun it in
Right.
there and the ball's going to get there. So when he's late, it looks really bad. And that happened way too much in this game. And really that's happened way too much over the course of his career. So his decision making was bad. I wrote down he looked uncomfortable in the pocket. Now you can say, all right, maybe he's playing his first game without Jason Kelsey. And no, he did do that at times last year. But yeah, I thought in this game, especially in the second half, he was bailing from clean pockets as well. So, yeah, I thought it was a very uneven performance. Like the things he does well, accuracy downfield. It was a nice touchdown pass to Saquon Barkley. He had a nice one to AJ Brown down the right sideline, where then AJ Brown can catch it in stride and take off for a 60-yard touchdown. So he can still do those things. But the other stuff, and the thing you didn't even mention here, because you're talking about him as a passer, him in the run game has been a problem now for over a year. Like their run
Yeah.
game with Jalen Hurts, and I'm not talking about the brotherly shoves. I'm talking about like the zone read, the shotgun stuff where he's supposed to be involved in it. I mean, if you watch that game, the RPO game, the option game was a complete mess. So I think they need to rethink what they want to do with that, because I do think for you to get the best version of Hurt, he's got to be doing something with his legs. Is it more inside runs? Is it more like the Cam Newton stuff from back in the day? Because the option stuff right now looks like a disaster.
Yeah, I tweeted this out on game night. It's a quote from Kyle Shanahan. It's from his time in Cleveland when he's talking about Johnny Manziel, and apparently, like I guess there was clamoring from the fans to run more zone read for Johnny Manziel, like he did for RG3 in Washington. And Shanahan was like, they're different athletes. RG3 runs a 4.3, Johnny runs a 4.6. And I think that's the point with Jalen Hurts. Like, in order to get the most out of him in the run game, you have to run him downhill. You can't do the zone read, pull it out, and run to the sideline, because he's not going to beat linebackers to the sideline. We've seen that, like you said, for 2 years now. You have to run the downhill stuff where he's like the inverted reads, where he's running downhill behind a pulling guard, and like the running backs is the one that's supposed to run around the corner. The problem with that, and this is what Kyle says, you get injured with those. You don't avoid hits with those. You have to take hits. And when you're paying a guy $50 million a year, like it's hard to call those plays a lot. So it's kind of a tough spot to be in if you're coaching staff, because you don't want to expose him to danger with that money invested into him. But at the same time, running these zone reads, like you said, I just don't think it's a viable option for them.
Yeah, we'll see what they decide to lean into, what version. I mean, my big takeaway from the game was that yes, they can get away with so much because of AJ. Eventually, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, or Saquon Barkley, like someone's going to make a play. Like they start the game with 2 turnovers, and you still scored 34 points, and you had a red zone turnover later, and you still scored 34 points. And you look at his numbers. I mean, he was 5th in success rate. He was 5th in EPA per pass play, but those are, to me, more symbolic of the offense than his individual play. Now, I thought last year the coaching was atrocious, and it was more on the coaching than it was on Jalen Hurts. But that's why I've said at the end of this year, we're going to get a very clear picture. Like they didn't throw the ball in the middle of the field in week 1. So now you can't tell me that's a coaching thing when the quarterback's the same and the coordinator's different. The stuff against the blitz, I thought they had more answers in this game. I mean, it was a very small sample, but at least the ball was coming out and he wasn't just scrambling and it's complete chaos back there. So those were positives. But yeah, the decision making has to be better from Jalen Hurts going forward. There's no doubt about that. All right. The last guy here. I did not watch the film of him yet. You wanted to talk about Baker Mayfield. The numbers were nutty for Baker Mayfield. I mean, I said it on the Sunday night show. He's saying, look at what Canales did in week 1 and look at what I did in week 1. Who was carrying who last year? Baker Mayfield goes 24 for 30, 289 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, 1 sack. He was first in EPA per play. He was second in success rate. Ruiz, does the film back up that this looked like a very good Baker Mayfield, or is there some flukiness to it?
It did in a way. Like this was the classic good Baker performance. This is the good Baker we saw in Cleveland, how he performed. The good Baker we saw last year. I thought Liam Cohen, offensive coordinator, first year offensive coordinator, was the star of the show. And maybe it wasn't that he was the star. Maybe it was that Dan Quinn was kind of the GOAT of this game. But I thought Cohen did a good job of keeping Baker Mayfield in rhythm, and specifically with outbreaking throws, where he was able to give him clear throwing lanes. He created clear throwing lanes between the offensive line, between the pass rush, where Baker didn't have to throw over the line. I think that's when you see Baker's mistakes, especially with accuracy and decision making. over half of, or no, nearly half of his throws were either out routes or corner routes. Like in the NFL, that the average is around like 15 to 20%. That's like double that. That's how often he was throwing these outbreaking routes, and they were all against man coverage, cover one, no, not just one safety in the middle of the field, so no help on the outside. Like I said earlier in the show, his A dot against zone coverage was 2.8 yards. So when he was throwing it downfield, it was against man coverage. And when you play a Dan Quinn defense, you're going to get a lot of cover one. And I think Liam Cohen did a really, really good job of exploiting that. I would say this was more about the play calling, the game plan than it was about Baker. But Baker did have to make the throws, and he made the throws. I mean, some of these deeper throws, Mike Evans, who I just think is the most underrated player in the whole NFL. Forget about receiver. Most underrated player in the NFL. It's still the Mike Evans offense. He's still the one carrying the team on third down. He's still the one making crazy grabs on third down. I think you had some skepticism about this team because of their third down success rate last year. That's usually a thing that regresses. But when you have Mike Evans, maybe it's not a thing that's going to regress. Just throw the ball to that guy. He's going to catch it every time. And that was more of the same in this game.
Yeah, that was my big thing before the season, was that if you looked at the Bucs numbers last season, they were great on third down. They were like bottom 5, bottom 8 on first and second down. And typically that's hard to sustain one year to the next. But what a start. I mean, I was skeptical of Liam Cohen. I mean, even if it's like you said, that it was more him than Baker Mayfield, like that's still pretty good. You know, if you're the Bucs, like if you have an OC who can dial stuff up. I was just looking at some numbers, and to your point, the aggressive way that the Commanders played, they blitzed Baker Mayfield a lot. Now, I don't know if these were just 5-man pressures or more than that, but when they rushed 5 or more, 10 for 13 for 146 yards and 2 touchdowns and 1 sack against the blitz. And the ball was coming out. I mean,
Quick.
He got rid of the ball in 2.36 seconds in this game. So it sounds like a lot of wasted blitzes where you're not, if the guy's getting rid of it in 2.36 seconds, you're probably not going to get there anyway. And he was obviously finding guys downfield. The stat line was probably the best of any quarterback here in week 1. So, hey, if you're a Bucs fan and you say, stop doubting us and no one thought we were, hey, you stick your chests out. You won week 1. You're defending NFC South champs. The Falcons look terrible. And you got a nice win there against the Washington Commanders. All right, that was fun. I'm glad we did this because it forced me to watch. So like I probably wouldn't have like watched the film of Herbert. I was like, that looked like a boring game. I don't need to watch the Herbert film this week, but very fun to watch Richardson, which I had to watch anyway. Cousins, I wanted to watch because they're playing the Eagles for the Ringers Philly special. By the way, a little plug for that again. We had a deep dive on Jalen Hurts and more stuff about the offense and what Kellen Moore did. If anyone wants more Jalen Hurts talk, that's the place you can find it. All right. It was fun, Ruiz. Any closing thoughts? Was there a quarterback who just missed the cut where you're like, he was kind of interesting, but we'll talk about him in a future week, or you felt good about these 6?
We talked enough about Burrow on Sunday, but I'm very concerned there. I'm very concerned with how he's playing because it's not the Burrow that we saw in 2021 and even during the hot stretch in 2022. Like this is 2023 Burrow, which is very concerning because he apparently doesn't have any injuries he's dealing with, although the wrist is a little questionable.
You know how like our phones just pick up everything we say, even when the thing's off. So we had that conversation. I defend Burrow, on the Sunday night show and even in my column today on theringer.com. And then I open the old X app and, it starts with the For You tab. First thing, Joe Burrow can't pick up a water bottle. And he's like doing this thing with his wrist. And I'm like, oh no, they heard me. My phone was next to the mic when I was talking on Sunday night.
It's looking out for you. Usually they're trying to sell you something. They're trying to get you some takes.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they're just like, take the L if, cut your losses if he plays crappy against the Chiefs on Sunday. But I don't know. I wasn't trying to be contrarian. I was watching that game on Sunday, and yes, they weren't throwing it downfield, but I didn't know if that was because he was choosing not to throw it downfield or whether it was just something schematically or what. But like he was making the short intermediate throws. He was moving around. So I don't know. We'll talk about that Sunday night, I'm sure.
He didn't really miss anything. It was more of a decision-making and aggressiveness problem, which we've seen from him before. I think he's going to figure it out. And as they get the receivers back too.
I got a lot of takes tied into that Bengals team. So we will see when I'm asking the producers, hey, can you delete this podcast from like August 24th? I just, I had said some bad words. Don't want my mom to hear it. Whatever. All right. Well, thank you to Steven Ruiz. Thank you to Troy Farkas for producing. He's going to produce this midweek show all season. Glad to have him on board. Additional production supervision by Connor Nevins and Arjuna Ramgopal. We'll be back in your feeds later this week for the big week 2 preview show. We'll have our picks. By the way, I don't want to spoil it, but our picks, Ruiz, on Sunday, 7-2 combined.
Woo.
Me, Ruiz, and Deontay. So listen, if you're jumping on the old FanDuel app, you might want to listen to that episode. So we'll do that later this week. Appreciate everyone listening. We'll talk to you next time on the Ringer NFL Show.